and you may begin.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. So good morning, council members. I'm Michael Johnson, the Director of the Department of Public Works and Transportation. Joining me this morning is Deputy Director Stacey Smalls on my left, and to the right, Deputy Director Oluche Olubenli. Following the recent snowstorm, several of you reached out directly to share the frustration of residents who have had to navigate snow-covered streets and icy roads over many days after the significant snowfall and subsequent sub-zero freezing temperatures. As Director of DPWT, I understand the inconvenience it has caused. Our snow response fell short of the high standards we strive to maintain as a department. Residents deserve timely plowing and salting in response to a snow event. These are critical to maintaining public safety and ensuring accessibility for residents and travelers throughout our county. A comprehensive snow removal plan is in place in the department. Nonetheless, inadequate resources to concurrently remove snow from both primary and secondary and residential streets was a problem. This challenged our ability to deliver consistent outcomes across all neighborhoods. While this offers no excuse for our response, it greatly informs the significant improvements we need to make to address future events. The hard work and commitment of DPWT employees is greatly appreciated, but we will and must do better. To this end, DPWT has thoroughly reviewed our snow operations to identify what went wrong and how to fix it. We have also assessed the PGC Track Snow portal, which failed to consistently reflect accurately the updates on the progress of our snowplows and the treatment status of our roads, so that we could, repair the deficiencies and improve in that area as well. Additionally, we have met with the acting county executive and acting chief administrative officer to discuss quality assurance and operational adjustments that are needed. The Department of Public Works and Transportation is committed to learning from this experience and implementing necessary improvements to avoid similar issues in the future. I appreciate your partnership and feedback and the observations of county residents. In today's presentation, we'll give you an overview of operations, immediate actions that we have taken and will take, as well as medium and long-term proposed improvements. I look forward to sharing our findings and the steps we are taking to provide the service you and our residents expect and deserve. So with that, I will go into the presentation, and I hope this is right. So this advances it. How do I advance it? Yep. Use the keyboard. Oh, use the keyboard. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so the DPWT has 5 operational levels for snow removal, and it reads from the left from the right to the left, excuse me. So we start with the snowflake operation, which is a salting operation of icy spots, hilly areas, and bridges. For more severe events, we have a DPWT-only operation, which is a salting operation when we have less than 2 inches of snow. When we are in the 2 to 4 inches of snow, we have what's called a modified operation, and that's a plowing operation. A full operation is a multi-day plowing operation. That's when we have greater than 4 inches of snow predicted, and we work in 12-hour shifts until the snow is, the roads are in a condition that is acceptable. And then the most severe is the blizzard operation, which where snow accumulation has to be removed from the roadways with heavy equipment. It can't just be pushed off. There's a priority order in which roads are serviced. So we pre-treat primary and collector roads prior to a snow event. And we use salt brine, which is a liquid salt that is used to help to, make it easy to remove the snow, or easier to remove the snow. We treat and plow primary and collector roads first during and after snowfall. And to give some context for that, within Prince George's County, we have more than 3.8 billion vehicle trips a year that go through the county on primary and collector roads. So those roads have to be prioritized. Failure to prioritize snow removal from those roads will not just impact Prince Georgians, but will have a collateral impact on the state of Maryland as a whole, given the location of the county and the roads that go through it. Following the treatment of the primary and collector roads, we then treat residential roads, and then we clear all roads to a complete condition. This is a graphic that shows the phased approach. We start with the primaries, we do the secondaries, and then we go to the residentials. So in that order. To get into the specifics of the January 5th storm, so between January 5th and 6th of 2025, the county experienced a significant winter storm that was challenging in several locations. One, it was a long storm. The precipitation period lasted a long time. And why is that important for us, for our operation? Because we are using a phased approach and we do not have the capacity currently to concurrently deal with primary roads and secondaries and residentials. Our assets were tied up, making the primary and secondary roads in good shape, and it took us a bit too long to get into the residential areas. So in that period that we were working in the primaries, people began to drive on the snow, which packed it down and created the icing conditions that then became a challenge for us to remove. So not only that, the very low temperatures created difficulties with the salt. To give some context for salt, road salt is very active at temperatures above 20 degrees Fahrenheit. If it is lower than that, it is not as active. It's not that it does not work, but it does not melt snow or ice as effectively as if the temperatures are above. So when we had the long stretch with the packed down ice, it really created this sort of like problem that we as a department faced. There is also a need to sort of define how we remove snow and what is meant. We received a lot of complaints of roads not being plowed. But if you look at this graphic, we have three categorizations of removal. There's passable, and that's where a plow goes through and makes its first pass. To remove snow takes many passes. A plow does not restore a road to bare pavement in one pass. It could take 4 or 5 passes depending on the character of the storm. So passable are conditions that would allow a passenger vehicle to negotiate the travel path using reasonable care. And that means the roadway is snow and or ice covered and reasonably level with minimal rutting. As we continue with the multiple passes, we get to what's called bare pavement. That's where about 3/4 of the road is exposed, as you're seeing in the image there. And then the completed is where curb to curb, notwithstanding vehicles parked adjacent to the curb, the road is in a condition that is as shown there. So those are the three categorizations of that we use for snow removal. So the pre-treatment plan for the snow event, we treated the primary roads, secondaries with brine. Then the operation shifted into the plowing phase. And as temperatures remained below freezing, we salted and plowed roads, finally working to the residential streets, which, we did start a bit late. This shows again, another look of actual streets as they looked during the event. This is a passable road from McCormick Road out here, just in front of the building. Bright Seat Road, this is bare pavement, about 3/4, and then Ruby Lockhart Boulevard. This is a complete view of what it looks like after several passes of the plow trains. In our planning, the planning that we take for storms is extensive. We have a pre-storm planning, and then during the winter event, we also, have very rigorous processes, and then post-event. In preparation for this, the preparation begins well before winter begins. We had a virtual community partners meeting at which we focused exclusively on snow. And we had many agencies participating, including MDOT, SHA, and WSSC, and several of the county agencies, the Fire Department, DOE, Department of Environment, and Office of Community Relations, and all geared to provide information to residents on what to expect during inclement weather. We also have an extensive social media outreach winter during the storm as well as post-storm. So the storm challenges, we had a problematic regional icing. We are using a phased versus the concurrent approach. We are not able to tackle both sets of streets, classes of streets with our current complement of equipment. The effectiveness of road salt at low temperatures. We had gaps in the AVL tracking system, which we have subsequently repaired. But there were some software glitches in it that was causing it not to track the plows consistently. And it was not something that we discovered until this event sort of forced us to look under the hood a little closer to discover what the problem was. The department also has limited pretreatment options. We use just brine, but there are a variety of other pretreatment options that are suitable for very low temperatures. We are in the process of building that capacity. We do not currently have that. That impacts our operations as well. We needed to improve our quality assurance and quality control within our command center to ensure that our streets are not missed or that they are serviced properly. And then another issue is a need to add language access resources. Many of our contractors are not native English speakers, and sometimes operators showing up for duty have difficulty communicating with our operations staff. They're given the maps, they're loaded with salt, but there are sometimes language barriers where our staff do not speak that language. They may not speak English particularly well. So that was another error that we discovered was in need of improvement. The 311, we received about nearly 5,300 complaints, and we've closed about 5,700 of those, and that's about 113 remaining. Let's talk a bit about the operational improvements. So we need to optimize our resources a little better we're looking at our snow routes to ensure that they're properly capitalized with the equipment we need. We're improving our technology that allows us to track our plows. We'll be bringing on different pretreatment strategies, improved quality assurance, additional contractor and staff training, better communications with the public, enhanced county partnerships. In this last storm, we had a lot of support from DPIE, who gave us 8 inspectors that helps to sort of improve our ability to monitor the routes, and performance monitoring and reporting. So we broke down the improvements into a series of categories. We have immediate actions that's occurring. These are things that are going to are going to be implemented in this winter season. So we refined the automated vehicle locator system. It is functioning correctly now, tracking the plows. We used it on this weekend storm, and it is locating the plows accurately and recording the streets on which they are going correctly. So that's been fixed. Adjust our deployment strategy for addressing primary and residential roadways. As I mentioned, in the phased approach, if we have what's called a clipper storm, a storm that moves quickly over the county, the phased approach can work. if we have a storm that sits on us or that is moving slowly, that requires us to stay on the primaries and secondaries, it's going to take us, with our current setup, time to get into the residential areas. We don't have enough equipment to do both concurrently. And that's something that we're working with Office of Procurement to try to improve on. More collaborations with the Office of Emergency Management, OCR, and other community partners, as well as elected officials to broaden outreach efforts. Expanding county partnerships. As I mentioned, we had a lot of support in this latest storm from DPIE, and implementing language access solutions to aid contractor communications. The short-term actions, those are between 6 and 12 months. We work with the Office of Procurement to continue to increase our complement of well-capitalized snow contractors. And what I mean by that is there are three classes of vehicles that we use. They're on the lower end, they're the 4x4s, which are the pickups, which are four-wheel drive. They're the six-wheel dump trucks, and they're the 10-wheel dump trucks. To deal with major roads, multi-lane roads, you need six-wheel and 10-wheel dump trucks, not 4x4s. They cannot adequately service a road of that width. They create what are called windrows, and you would probably see those on the wider roads where there's like a band of snow left in the middle of the road. What we currently have are inadequate number of 6 and 10 wheelers which are servicing large roads. We need to get into the position of like what you would observe like on the interstates, where you have a train of 6 and 10 wheelers, the big trucks that are working concurrently to push the snow from one truck to the other truck off the road. So that way it's opened up. Having that would then allow us to deploy our smaller units into the residential areas, which cannot take 6 or 10 wheels. Many of those streets are too narrow to take the 6 and 10 wheel trucks, but they're serviceable by the 4x4s. So we need to really work on that. Refine our finance projections so that we're, sort of using a bit more data with the lane mile analysis. Training and condition assessments. Our midterm strategy, which is 12 to 18 months, we need additional heavy equipment operators. That has been a challenge. The CDL drivers are difficult for agencies like ours to hire. There's a lot of competition in terms of like some of the big box stores, Amazon, Walmart, and some other local governments that pay more. And it becomes an economic sort of a decision that the operators make when we try to hire them. Develop and implement comprehensive contractor performance standards. Continue the collaboration with county partners, and do an in-depth assessment of the snow program to sort of see if we can make it a little more efficient. Our long-term strategy, which we put at 18 to 24 months, is to develop the capacity, to build the capacity to work and deal with extreme events. And I would consider a slow-moving storm an extreme event, particularly if it's coupled with low temperatures, because it prevents us. We cannot remove assets from the primaries and secondaries to begin plowing the residential streets until the primaries and secondaries are in good condition. That's just not possible to do. It would not be appropriate to do that. It's not a best practice. It would have cascading effects that are almost catastrophic if we did that. So the phased approach, it only works if we have like a slower moving storms. If we have fast moving storms, we have slower moving storms, it's not really going to really be effective. And we need to build the capacity to sort of deal with that. So that's the formal presentation. And at this point, I would avail the team to answer questions.
Okay, let's see. Well, I have a couple of things. Ms. Blagay, I will put you down after Ms. Fisher. So a couple of things. One, I wanted to thank you for the tour you took me on a snowplow. It was good to see things kind of up close and personal, to see what you were up against, and I appreciate that opportunity. And I know how hard everybody worked through this. Maybe we didn't work the smartest, which I know that you're working on, but everyone definitely is working hard. And when I went there, I saw a full staff there, really trying to get to the bottom of things. Some things I think that you did know, which I'm curious about, like we knew what the weather report was, and we knew it was going to be really cold. But I know that the salt mixture that you ended up having to buy costs more and it's harder on the environment, or the things you explained to me. But we didn't have any on hand, even though we knew it was going to be really cold. So since we knew that going in, I guess my first question is, why didn't we prepare accordingly? And you did say you're starting to stockpile some now.
Yes, Councilor. So for the very low temperatures, as I mentioned, the road salt is not as effective. So we have introduced a magnesium chloride based salt which works at really low temperatures. Not only is it expensive, cost isn't the real issue. It is also quite aggressive in reacting with the environment. So it's not really something that you would use except in the most extreme of conditions, like where you have dangerous areas that are icy, maybe hilly areas or other areas that are sort of posing a life safety. It's not a treatment that you would use throughout the county. It would damage the roads ultimately. We'd end up with greater cost, or maybe even the concrete as well. It's not really used as a replacement for road salt. I think the main issue was the amount of time it took us to get into the primaries, that people began to drive on it and pack it down, and then it became icy. With the low temperatures, it froze. And that really, I think if one area that we, could make an improvement to sort of deal with storms of this character, because it's not the only type of storm that we will face of this nature, is the ability to concurrently service both areas, both classes of roads. That's really the bigger issue than using very aggressive chemicals. We have that as a fallback, but it's not going to be like a replacement for the salt, even when we have low temperatures.
Okay. Well, I do know it's harder. It's harder on the roads, and I look at it as harder on the environment generally, so I wouldn't, say that should be our first thing. And I'm certainly no expert on snow removal. I don't even shovel at home. I have kids for that and a husband. So, but knowing what we know now, maybe it does make sense to have more of that ready to go. And if we know that the temperature is going to be below 20 for an extended period of time, and we know how people are going to behave, it's like putting the crosswalk where people want to cross the street. If you don't do it, then, you're just going to run into a mess, which is what we essentially had. One thing I wanted to note, and the reason why I asked to be taken to South County on the snowplow, is that area of the county really seemed to be, I would say, neglected the most when it came to snow removal. And I think part of the problem could be that the elevations in that part of the county can be much higher, which means that the roads on the higher elevations with the hills there can really create problems. I think we had someone come speak today about being at the bottom of such a hill. So what can you think of that we can do to deal with areas like that?
I think that is our snow district. We have 5 snow districts, and the portion of the county you're referring to it falls into District 4 primarily, and District 3, part of District 3, but District 4 is the bulk of that. In that area, it is large, and one of the things that we're looking at as we're looking at the legacy snow maps and setup is there adequate machinery that is sort of allocated to that snow district. We are sort of in the process of being close to sort of answer that. And what we did during the storm with our with our associate director who was working with Stacy in the command center and myself, is that we began to reallocate equipment to District 4 as the district managers were sort of seeming to fall behind. So by putting more equipment, so when District 1, which is one of our smaller districts, was in better shape, we, as opposed to releasing the contractors, we would redeploy them to District 4. So over time, they got more of the assets that they need. So that seems to indicate that District 4's complement of equipment is not adequate. So it's taking them longer to sort of service the residential areas. They're working in the same phased approach on the primaries, but you have lots of residential, you have lots of cul-de-sacs, and in looking at past complaints, lots of those seem to be missed, or we get a lot of complaints from those. And, that seems to be part of what is needed, just from that sort of apocryphal approach, if you will. I mean, we were going through an analytic approach to sort of determine what the right equipment complement is, and that will improve as we sort of finish that exercise.
Yeah, I'm sure that with the amount of snow we've gotten most years lately, you haven't really had a lot of experience having to deal with it. And although I love snow, I kind of hope we don't get any more this year. Let's see, I wanted to also bring up, you already talked about the snow portal, the tracking system not working, and you fixed that. And you mentioned the residents driving on the roads, which packed it into ice, which was a problem for you. Now, was parking a problem for you, where people were parking?
Parking was a problem, particularly in District 3, a lot of District 3 areas. It prevented trucks from sometimes being able to get through.
Would you mind kind of sharing with us what each of those districts? I hear District 3, and
I'm sorry.
I don't really know exactly where that is, so if you could kind of let us know.
Yeah, sure. Like District 3, one of the problem areas in District 3 is the Temple Hill, Hillcrest Heights area. So there are lots of there's a very hilly area with very narrow streets and with cars that park on both sides. So some of the complaints we got were that people saw like a 6-wheel truck. One of the big trucks come in, he paused, and then he left. And they said, well, look, so the plow came and, it didn't do anything. The driver reported back to the district that he could not safely negotiate that street, so they had to replace it with a 4x4, with one of the 4x4, the pickups, which were, by him skillful negotiating his plow blade, could get through. But some of those areas are very challenging on some of the snow routes for them to plow. We do not have any prohibitions against parking during even the most severe weather. So that somewhat adds to the challenge that we face in some locations, not in all the districts, but in some locations with plowing those streets. So yes.
Should we have a restriction on people parking on both sides of the street during a snow emergency?
Yes, it would be helpful. I wouldn't say that it's a global adjustment. We could identify routes on which historically have given us problems, or we need the heavier trucks to help with. And, it could probably restrict parking on one side during a snow event as opposed to doing it countywide. That might be something. But we would have to look at that. We have not really had the chance to really thoroughly look at that. We have, nearly 50,000 streets, so we have to sort of look at that in a more comprehensive way.
Right. And finally, I believe I know the answer to this, but for generally speaking, when you look at streets like 202, Landover Road, there were complaints about it, but that is a state road, and I'm assuming that State Highway sends trucks for that. Or are we responsible for plowing it?
No, you're correct. Within Maryland, any numbered route is a state route. So 202, 214, any of those would be state routes. And SHA, Maryland, MDOT SHA, State Highway Administration, is responsible for plowing those.
Would it make sense for us to make some kind of MOU with them so that we can plow some as needed, and maybe we get money back or something, because it did look pretty bad, and it's a major road?
I don't think we have the capacity to do that currently. We would have to
Capacity
really.
is money.
Yeah, well, we don't have the complement of big trucks. Like 202 needs the the 6-wheelers minimum, 10-wheelers preferred, or the combination to plow that. Now there was a sort of like I think a gentleman who had started a rumor that we'd run out of salt. He was looking at 202, and he was saying that Largo Road was a consequence of the county not having salt. That's absolutely false. Within our domes, we started the storm with nearly 44,000 tons of salt. And, we had adequate salt for many storms. But we'd have to look at that carefully. We have barely enough trucks to sort of deal with what we are responsible for than taking on SHA or helping SHA.
Right. Let's see, Councilmember Sidney Harrison.
Madam Chair, Director Johnson and the leadership team of the Department of Public Works and Transportation, I want to first thank you for joining us today to really communicate with us about lessons learned from this last snowstorm. But I also want to thank the men and women for the long work that they put in at your agency to try to clear these county roads. To the public, I want to make a public apology. We are a governing body. The executive branch has control over the Department of Public Works and Transportation. We work in conjunction with the Department of Public Works as the legislative branch to be a conduit to the public to try to get those needs met. And so I want to make an apology to the citizens of this county. I think we all are trying to do our best, but we failed at some point. That being said, there was a lot of inadequacies, a lot of confusion in communication. I would like to see what I thought that from the lessons learned is better communication with the public. Before the snowstorm happens, the expectations that we should have to provide this service in a timely manner to the residents, whether it is about parking, whether it is about cars in a cul-de-sac and the plow can't get down, the difference between state roads and county roads and HOAs. The way some constituents see it is snow's on the road, it needs to be removed. And that's a natural response. And so it's really about getting ahead of these things. We knew the snow was going to come. Now, we didn't know how these temperatures would just have dropped so dramatically. And then, of course, the long precipitation of that storm. But I think more education is better. And so I think the Department of Public Works could look at a very aggressive plan in communication and how they reach the citizens of this county. I think the constipation in communication came from 311 to the Department of Public Works, and then people were getting highly frustrated, as I was too, to be able to get someone to talk to, right? So what did they do? They called all of our offices. Then you had council members going out trying to assist the community as well, because they were getting frustrated. We felt helpless. I honestly, I think that's the feeling everyone got, is that we all felt helpless in this moment. And so, I think there needs to be an improvement, and you need to be able to explain how you confirm or approve the actual work that's been done. There's a lot of miscommunication in that. Some streets were supposedly plowed, but they weren't. We just heard from a young lady that was here that definitely said that you all said that you'd be there in 48 hours, and it's 240 hours later. you know, that's problematic. When we look at the Department of Public Works and Transportation Snow Ice Control Employee Information Memo that was sent out on January 8, 2025 at 7:30 in the morning, even that, when you talked about your tiered system, in this slide, where you talked about snowflake removal, 0 to 2 inches. On this one, you sent out a yellow stating orange shifts should start at 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then snowflake operations started at Wednesday, 9 p.m. If we have 10 inches of snow, I guess I'm confused about why are we in snowflake removal? What's going on with that? Or just the explanation of that. And so you have 5 different districts, 3 and 4 in South County. South County was definitely forgotten about. And, you know, Madam Chair, you said you rode around in a snowplow. One thing I do know is that the South County has more mild roads of county roads in South County than it has in any other area. So regardless of the elevation, there's more miles per road in South County than any part of the other the county. So how are the employees broken up into that when it comes to District 1, District 2, District 3, District 4, District 5? How are those employees? Operational staffing, what does that look like? Geographical location, is it equal? You know, and if I have these questions, God forbid, what does the public have? You know, what kind of questions do they have? And so that's why I'm coming back to this point of hammering it home. Communication is everything. And you can have all the equipment, you can have all the resources, but if the communication and the execution of that plan is poor, we're going to get the same result. Okay? And so I think there needs to be an education, an engagement, and an empowerment for all of us when it comes to snow removal. What is the expectation, the do's and don'ts? You know, I got a call in my office about the Parking Revenue Authority. This lady had 7 cars in a cul-de-sac, but the lady she was really going through childbirth, so she couldn't have someone remove all these cars. The neighbor called, and then all of a sudden, the Parking Revenue Authority just can't come and tow cars. So that street now is forgotten about, and that became a huge problem. And so mine wasn't necessarily about questions, but is really hammering home. I really think the communication has to be better. If you know a storm's coming 72 hours in advance or 42 hours in advance, you should be on the camera talking, giving a message to the residents about what the expectation is and who to call. 311, I think that's a whole nother conversation, Madam Chair. I think that we need to do a briefing with 311 and really look at how they close tickets out, because they were closing tickets out with still with problems. And so I'm just going to leave it there. But please, please, I implore you to improve on your communication.
We will, Councilman. Thank you.
Councilmember Fisher.
Start with just my requests first that are kind of questions, and then I'll go into questions. So the slide that has PGC 311 DPWT with the districts, I don't understand why snow districts don't reflect council districts. So like as a council member, I can't tell where District 2 falls in the 5 districts. And I think if the public was going to, and I believe, Madam Clerk, all of our PowerPoints and everything is open to the public, right? So if the regular citizens looking at this, or even talking about our conversation today after we all leave, they can't figure out what was successful, not like the average resident in Prince George's County knows their county council district. right? Because we all got phone calls for the last 2 weeks. And some of us couldn't shovel because some of us have nails and couldn't be out there, like some council members. So I would request if in future, if like snow districts could just mirror council districts so that we know what's going on, you know what's going on, and more importantly, the residents understand what's going on. And then so that's just really a request. I hope you can do it. I don't think anything legally is keeping you from doing that. The other thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to the 311 related requests and the numbers just don't seem to add up to me for what's going on in my office. But then again, I can't figure out the data because I don't know a snow district versus my district. So at first I was thinking that, but then I realized all the districts are not reflective of council districts. I can't even tell you now. So that's like that was that question. The second thing, oh wait, I wrote all of it on the back. So I wrote it down. The other thing that I was going to say was, I know this is like our second little briefing. I was on the delegation call and then today about, it was going to get, the temperatures got really, really freezing and no one could predict that it was going to be that freezing. I just question that notion. Sometimes in life, I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes and we just have to admit we made a mistake and go forward. And I think that is what the public expects, because I don't understand how no one would think that it would get freezing temperatures and it wouldn't freeze like that. And I think a lot of residents view, well, the ice, the salt mixture wasn't enough to thaw that, yet my $20 bag from Lowe's or Home Depot thawed my house. So it's kind of hard for them and for myself to understand the salt that people are buying themselves to dig out their house, salt their house. I even salt along the roadway of mine because I'm a dip down slope versus what DPWT is using. So I think my question is, what's the difference between your salt and the salt that we're buying at Home Depot and everywhere else?
I'm not sure what you're buying at Home Depot, but if you're using like any of the brands like Ice Melt, it's more calcium chloride and magnesium chloride based material. It's not just sodium chloride, which is the salt, which is the sort of the rock salt. So they're different. These chloride salts have different melting temperatures, effectiveness at different temperatures. So if you're dealing with the sodium chloride, which is the road salt, it's effective, it's not as effective below 20 degrees if it's really cold. But if you did switch either calcium or magnesium quick melt or any of those brand names, it's effective to negative 25 degrees. It's really effective at very low temperatures. And that is part of what we did not have, but we procured for this January 5th storm. We also used it last night in some areas that froze because we now have integrated it into our equipment. However, it is more corrosive than the road salt. And it's not that we did not know that the temperatures were low. It's that in assessing it and doing the sort of a quick post-mortem, so to speak, of the event, is that it took us too long to get into the residential areas. And during that period, people drove on the snow and it became icy over a wide swath of streets to a point coupled with the low temps, the road salt that we had was not as effective in sort of breaking up the ice in the way that we wanted to break it up. So the plows were not able to really sort of be effective using that. So as I was mentioning, I think that really the remedy is to be able to concurrently deal with both classes of roads. Primaries and secondaries are non-negotiable. We must do those first. But we also have to have the ability to send vehicles into the residential areas concurrent with the crews working on the primaries. And that would then prevent this sort of situation from repeating.
And then Director Johnson, on my first request, do you think you all will be able to do it by council district going forward instead of snow district? Can you commit to that?
To give some context, I mean, it's something that we are looking at. The DPWT districts, which are the snow districts, they're set up, I think, related to where the maintenance yards are. And they don't, as you're pointing out, they don't overlap with the council districts. We could map it. We could map it so that it becomes clear, so that you will find that the snow district 1 might encompass 3/4 of Councilmanic District 1 and part of District 2 or something like that. I think that might be better because our entire operation is geared around the maintenance districts, which are reflected as snow districts. So it would be a very significant change, but I think the map might be a way to sort of make it clear for council members to understand which district, snow district, or how that relates to your district.
I think that would be helpful, and for the public and municipal leaders, because right now all the data doesn't really mean much to us. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, and I try to be problem solver, not just pointing out the problems. You talked about two things. You talked about the need for intensifying the need of CDL drivers when it comes to probably your entire operation, not just snow and other things. And I just would put out there organizations, Councilmember Olson and I are very familiar with CAF, and they do an amazing CDL, fully Spanish language program that I've been a part of, that I've supported. And I just would put out there maybe partnering with programs like that. And you won't see the result immediately in a year, but if you fund 10 spots, and part of that contract of funding of helping someone get their CL that they have to then work for the county, something like that is something that I think you all should definitely look out. You have to kind of recruit and train out there so that you can get the result here. Because I understand you're competing in the DMV market. But I just wanted to point out CAF to you all and an actual tangible thing that you all could work on going forward. And the contact for that would be Wakiria Pool, and I'm sure she would be interested. And the MVA now provides CDL fully in Spanish. So I just want to put that out there. So that's not really a question, that's a suggestion. And then the other question that I had, and I don't know if this is for you, Director Johnson, and you work very hard, Director Johnson, you know I know that. So I'm always excited to work with you, is when it comes to the Spanish language access point with our contractors and our county government, I think for me, this would be probably like a DCAO question, maybe not you, Director Johnson question, but we're in a public forum, is what is our county's policy during snow or an emergency situation where bilingual county employees can be utilized at times like these, right? So it's you all had communication gaps. I live in a communication gap in my district. I only speak Spanish conversationally, not fluently, and 52% of my district is Spanish speaking, right? But I don't serve my district alone. So my question, not really to you, Director Johnson, it's more to Ms. Skinner and I think the administration, is how are you utilizing your Spanish speaking employees to assist your agency when you're in that time? To either be on call, to have their phone, and to be helping DPWT. So I don't know if Chair Ivey is taking questions from but I would point that to Ms. Skinner, not really you, Director Johnson. And I think you should be doing that, especially if you know you have contractors that are Spanish speaking. I think every bilingual county employee under the administration should be utilized, and they can work from home to be that language gap for you in an emergency situation, right? And that's no money off. So I don't understand why you're not doing that already. And then the other thing that I wanted to know more about, and again, Director Johnson, I don't know if this question's for you or just the administration, is I haven't heard a lot about your partnership with the Office of Emergency Management and Director Gill's shop. If you could just highlight that, does it in a snow situation, and our committee we took a tour recently, a couple of months ago, in a snowstorm like this, does now emergency management, you use their headquarters and they're a part of it? Or can you talk a little bit to the council about what is the relationship with emergency management and Director Gill's shop and you during snow?
Sure. So there were a couple of things in there. I just wanted to know your suggestion with the CDL is an excellent one. And internally, we have started a training program for CDL staff. So staff who are currently on staff, we sponsor 12 people to go through the CDL training to give us a CDL Class A. And I think that class is coming to the end of its tenure. We felt that was a more strategic way to garner the staff that we need rather than, competing with some of the big box stores or things of that nature. So we pay for it, and the staff would work with us once they pass that. To the question with OEM, the relationship with OEM is very close. We have a representative during the snowstorm who's in our command, who participates with us in our snow operations. And we work closely with Director Gill and have a representative who goes to the EOC if he opens it, if the storm merits that. They are essential for effective snow operations. If we had, say, a very large storm, say a blizzard or something close to that, they're the agency that has the authority, that has the ability to garner resources, regional resources to help us, whereas we, as a department, have less ability to do so. So our relationship with them is very close. We work really closely hand in glove with them during snow events, and they feed us information and help us, where they can.
Is I'm really interested in our partners regionally, and if we could have a follow-up to this on like what you found your partners in Montgomery County and DC did well, didn't do well. How are you all working together? And then my other follow-up to that, because I know other colleagues have questions, a part of my district, which is called Carroll Highlands, and it borders Montgomery County and Tacoma Park. I think it also got forgotten because I don't know who does the contract. I think people literally probably thought it was Montgomery County, and it's really us. They weren't pre-salted yesterday. I have like 20 emails I can forward to you. Carroll Highlands just continues to be very, and I live across the street, but my area, you can like tell it's really Prince George's. They're so bordered to Tacoma Park that I don't know if it's getting lost or confused or what. And they're totally unincorporated. There's no municipality, but they border the city of Tacoma Park. So I think there's a lot of lack of communication with that, and I would love a follow-up. And I would love a follow-up on MoCo and DC. You talking to your partners, you can bring back to us what worked and what didn't. So thank you.
Yes, we'd be glad to. But for this particular storm, even though they focused a lot on Prince George's County, it was not unique. For instance, VDOT, which is a very large agency, extremely large agency, had a lot of similar problems in dealing with the residential streets. And even Montgomery County had problems as well. But, the focus was on, we're not sort of trying to deflect the lens from DPWT's performance, but we were not unique in the region in terms of dealing with this challenge. I think some of the other agencies, for instance, VDOT has about 3,000 trucks that participate in their snow operation. Montgomery County DOT had about nearly 360, somewhere in that range, which are responding. We were in about 200 and some, 230 per shift. So it really sort of then forces us into the phased approach that we have found to be effective in dealing with types of storms. And we need to, one of the improvements that I'm suggesting and that we found is the need for an ability for concurrent operation. I think that would sort of mitigate a lot of these sorts of challenges, regardless of the type of storm that we get outside of a blizzard, which, kills everyone. But for most regular storms, that would sort of address it.
Thank you, Ms. Blagay.
So thank you. I want to thank my colleagues for the questions because a lot of it was addressed, some of the concerns that I initially had. I do want to thank Olusegun for always responding. I did send you multiple emails when I was we were pretty panicked because my direct community, my neighbors were complaining, and I do appreciate that. You were one of the only ones that actually responded, so thank you. I just want to know, I do agree with Councilman Harrison that this was a huge communication problem. And one of the big issues, not trying to compare us to other jurisdictions, is that our communication did not match what was executed. So I just want to start with some of the first question I was going to ask. We did see snow like this in, I believe, 2011, 2010, and 1996. Was there anybody that was consulted within the agency that was around at that time during those snowstorms prior to the snowstorm? Because we did have at least a week warning that the snowstorm was coming. Did we consult with anybody around that was around during that time period?
Yes, our operations team has been in place for a long period of time. I mean, we have a new associate director, but the staff who are heavy in the operations side. I've been with the agency for a long time, and I guess you're referring to the the moniker they've given it of Snowmageddon or something like that.
Right,
Right.
right, because we had much worse snow than we had here, and I lived in a county for the one that we had at least in 2010. I don't know if it's 2010 or 2011, but I don't remember. I remember they were able to clear, even though people complained then, there was less ice on the ground then than there was this year, and we had less snow. We had less snow with that one. So I just want to know, are we using the resources we have within the agency to consult them to say to lay out a plan?
We do, and we do have extensive, as I mentioned, we have extensive pre-planning and, for storms. As we figure out how we're going to sort of tackle this storm. I think there might be a bit of a difference because I also experienced, not in Prince George's County with the Snowmageddon storm, is that the amount of snow that fell prevented people from driving. You could not physically drive on it. So even though you had more accumulation, it was not really sort of icy because vehicles could not travel. It was just impossible to travel with 2 feet of snow, 2 feet plus of snow. Some areas got close to 3 feet of snow. You could not travel. So it's a bit different. Removing the snow, is different from sort of dealing with ice. Ice is the snow fighter's worst nightmare in a sense, that if you ever get icing, it's really difficult without the aid of chemicals to remove it. And that, I think there's a bit of a nuance difference in the storms. The fact that we took too long to go into the residential areas and we had enough snow that people could drive in it, that they had to go about their business. They went about their business, helped to pack it down and sort of create the sort of icing condition that really turned out to be a real challenge for us in the residential streets. But we do have very experienced staff who we do consult with, and we don't have any shortage of that in the department.
And I would just follow up with that. I in some of my communities, that was not the experience. A lot of my communities cannot get out of their homes because of the ice, meaning that they could not even drive out. I know there was a question about parked cars, but outside of the parked cars, there were full ice rinks in the middle of the community. So we did, I know if you want to remember, I forwarded you a couple of messages where we had people who needed to get their medicine but couldn't leave their home. So I just do think that a lot of the communities that had the ice issue could not leave because they were scared of the sliding on the road. So I just want to note that. The second question I have is, and I want to just say, with your initial plan, when did you plan to get to the residential roads? And the reason why I'm asking that, because the part of the communication problem was that we were told after the last snow, 48 hours, and then file your 311 complaint. Now, we actually sent emails to our residents advising them such, but the problem was that after 48 hours, most of the residential roads still had not been done. So the question that I have is that if you're encouraging 311, to me, that's an assumption that your understanding is that most residential roads would be done within 48 hours, which would mean if you were filing 311, you would have been a road miss. I would most likely assume that you would not encourage us to have residents file 311 if you knew most of the residential streets would not be touched within 48 hours.
Yeah, Councilmember, I don't think that we, with natural events like snow, that, you're going to, it's not like a deterministic thing where you can say that, this and therefore that. I mean, I think that that time period is based on a reasonable assumption of the type of storm that you will encounter. And what really was challenging with this storm is the amount of time it took for the storm to leave Prince George's County. It snowed for 11 hours or something like that, if I recall. You had 2 bands of snow. During that period of snow, our assets are on the primaries and secondaries. We could not take them off those. We had to get those done. So it's taking that time before any rail force is being sent into the residential areas. So to the point I was making, to the major improvement that I'm suggesting that the department needs to make is we have to take into account that we can't control the type of storm that will come over us. They all won't be fast moving. some will sit on you they could sit on you for a day, two, and snow. So we have to have the capacity to concurrently tackle both sets of roads. We must do primaries and secondaries for the reasons I mentioned. More than 3.8 billion vehicle trips go through Prince George's County every year. It's essential that those roads are dealt with, primaries and secondaries. However, it is also important that people are able to get medicine, or that you're able to sort of get about in the residential areas. The way that we do that is to have an ability to, concurrent with the primaries being dealt with, plow the secondary roads, the residential roads. And that's an equipment supplement that is needed to allow us to be able to do that. If we're able to do that, we would then have the capacity as an agency to do that. And this sort of problem would not materialize, again, for most reasonable storms.
Is and I would say that I understand and I'm just noting all of this, but the bigger issue is putting out the communication that was put out. That's what also led to the panic in our community, because 48 hours people started to do 311 requests, and we were getting phone calls because people saying, what's going on? It's been 48 hours. And when we reached out to you all, it seemed like there wasn't quick responses. Maybe you were overwhelmed, but I know from my office, each person was told to make sure people understand to do 311 within 48 hours. And I do want to mention another part. Was there any agency meetings with all agency heads, almost like a plan on deck of like everybody sitting in the room talking to each other? This is when I'm talking about trash removal, 311, because there were a couple things I noticed. I know this is not about 311, but the 311 was one of the tools that you all sent out using for communication from residents. When people put 311 requests, oftentimes either they were dismissive, which the lady said, but we got notices of that, or it told them that they will get a response. I think there was one that was forwarded to it that they were going to get a response by January 14th. So should be, if you are going to tell people to call 311, there should be a response. There should be an immediate response, that there will be response within 24 hours, because basically someone was saying, hey, when is my street going to be removed, thing? And then they were saying, multiple people came back and they said that this will be resolved by January 13th or 14th. So that would be next week. So then it upset people even more. So they would call the office. They were even more mad, because one lady who is an advocate in the community and very active was like, so should I have to wait till next week? And she lives with seniors, and all in there was ice. They're basically telling you they have to wait till January 14th for it to be resolved. So there should have been a 311 prompt. I mean, this is a time of AI that you all could put something there that would say this will be resolved within 24 hours. So then that would be done. Second part is I'm going to bring in the DOE trash removal. All of 202, the communities in my district did not have trash removed, because there was we didn't know why. When I sent an email to the director of Department of Environment, she responded back that the trucks had let them know that they could not go down the roads because they were so icy, so they were going to come next week. But here's the problem with the communication. You all sent a graphic that said that your snow would be this day due to the snowstorm, so if it was Wednesday, it would be Friday. So we sent that out to our residents. So our residents are saying, okay, my actual trash day, because mine is Wednesday, it wasn't going to be done Wednesday according to your graph. It will be done on Friday. But then on Friday came, and then there was no trash removed, and then comes to find out that someone in the agency was already aware that trucks would not go down roads that were icy, which makes sense. So was there a discussion between interagency about the process? Was there the plan of having people sitting there answering phone calls? I know there was 12-hour shifts, but there was a 12-hour shift just snow removal and not necessarily a communication between agencies?
So there were several meetings that we had. The Homeland Security Director Gill did convene a meeting pre-storm, where all the agencies and partners were involved in the meeting to sort of talk about the characteristic of the storm that was approaching, and then to get brief outs from different departments on state of readiness and things of that nature. We also subsequently had a meeting with both DOE and DPWT with acting CX Jackson and acting CO Stanton to talk about the coordination between the agencies in terms of messaging. And one of the deficiencies we found is that DOE is not in our snow center as such. And that's something that needed to be improved. So while we do sort of during the snow event, we do have regular brief outs on the state of roads, the state of completion, equipment failures, or other issues that we might be facing. We were not communicating that to the Department of the Environment, and that's an area that we need to improve, and we have improved. We have them now on the calls now. We did it for this last storm that we had this weekend.
Thank you. My last question would be around what roads were you all required to do versus like HOAs and things like that? Because I know you all were doing residential roads, but there were certain roads where I'm not sure whether the HOA was supposed to do it or not. We did we got a few complaints. I mean, Cameron Grove, Ms. Philippa texted a couple of us this morning that some of the HOAs said that they had to basically do the streets on their own. Because they were waiting for snow removal to come and it didn't. So I wanted to know what is the limit? Where was it where the DPWT covered the road? Where was it? Was there any responsibility for HOAs for some of the community to do their roads? Just making clear, just getting clarity, because I thought maybe that was the confusion for residential roads at the beginning when a lot of people weren't getting their roads plowed.
So the county, DPWT can only plow county-owned roads. So we have different owners in the county. There's state roads, federal roads like Suitland Parkway, things of that nature. There are also private roads. So if a road is private, we do not plow it. We are not permitted to plow it. So I would have to know a bit more about this specific road that was not treated. But the plow tracker, I think, which has been repaired now, is also a good tool to use to sort of see progress of the operation, as which it will last multiple days when you have a reasonably decent snowstorm. But if you could give me the specific streets, I could get you an answer on that as to the.
Okay, and I would say for Cameron Grove, they talked about the street, so that was street cleanup. I would say there was a huge delay with trash in their neighborhood, but there were some others that people literally didn't understand and was reaching out to their HOAs, CCing us, frustrated, and then it wasn't clear from them whether this was the HOA supposed to do. So like NA do. So a good example is Westphalia Town Center, right there. So Westphalia Town Center, in their roads, where was it? What streets had to be done by Westphalia Town Center versus the county, or did the county do all of the roads that went into Westphalia Town Center? So I just really, that needs to be clarified, whether it's a county, where does the county just do Westphalia Road and every other, and then the planned communities around it do their own roads? Like there's something, we're not talking about the parking lot, I'm talking about the actual streets in and around, because that's part of it. I would even mention Marlboro Riding was a big one. Some of the communities right off of Ritchie Marlboro, they could not get out of their community. So first they reached out to 311. That was where many people from 311 got the response from you all to respond on the 13th or 14th. So then they reached out to us, and then they started emailing the Marlboro Riding leadership to HOA to see who would get there, because it was ice there until Friday night.
So there are also like another nuance with streets. We have streets that are dedicated for public, like they're classified as OP, other public, or OPS, other public surfaced. Those streets are not under DPWT maintenance as well. And if you look at we have the PAMS, which system which allows you to sort of see the classification of roads. If you look at it on the DPWT website, it would
Right.
sort of tell you the classification of the roads and who owns it, who owns the road, and that way. So we do not plow those. We do not plow private streets, or we don't even streets that have not been turned over to the county. It could still be under developer control. It could be built. People could be living there, but the road may not be approved by DPIE to turn over to us yet. So we don't plow those. Those would be private. And we have some of those in some of the more recent subdivisions. But, we can check that area and sort of get back to you with an answer.
Okay, and thank you. I mean, honestly, I will tell you that as you noted, and I'm glad you were able to admit, the planning for this was pretty disappointing, and the communication was really what made it worse. I understand that other jurisdictions had some of the same problems, but there did seem to be communication there in a way that we did not have here, which create more frustration among residents. So we really should do better next time. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Denoga?
There we go. I was actually here for not only Snowmageddon, but the Forgotten Storm of 2002. No one's mentioned that. And I think you faced a lot of challenges that you've already addressed. Ice more than depth, although there was a certain amount of depth. When you're dealing with the blizzards over 12 inches, it's a whole different ballgame. And like you said, you can't even move. Ice, what did we have? We had like 6 to 8 inches.
We had 6 to 10, around 10, maybe 10.
And most of your vehicles are not prepared to deal with that. So that's one problem. But the other problem is the ice issue, which was not a typical situation that we've had in the past, even with those blizzards. That was more depth rather than ice. So I acknowledge all that, and people have covered a lot of things. I do want to get one definitional issue out. Primary, secondary, and major collectors, or whatever, that's on your slide. Can you give us examples of what those are? Because when I think of primary county roads, so we're not talking state or federal. Okay, so we don't have 3.8 billion people driving on primary roads. A lot of those are in South County. I'm thinking like an Accokeek Road or Brandywine Road. Is that a primary road?
That classification, Councilman, is determined by the width of the road. Mm-hmm. So a primary road in Prince George's County's road classification is a road that has a minimum width of 120 feet.
Pavement or right away?
The cartway, the pavement, 120 feet. The secondary roads are slightly smaller. I think it's around 100 feet. And then you have primaries and primary residential and secondary residential, which are 60 for primary residential, and secondary residential, very likely your cul-de-sac type roads, are 50 feet width. So it's driven by the width of the road, and that is set by the planning department, the MNCPPC.
So I'm just trying to figure out where we have so many primary roads. If it's that wide, you're talking 2 to 3 lanes on each side, but not a state road, not a federal road. So
it's probably like a 4-lane road. Your 4-lane roads would probably be your primaries, and your roads that might be 3 or something in that, would be at points would probably be your secondary, to sort of give like a rough way of sort of describing it.
Yeah, I can just think of my district. I don't know of any roads that meet that classification, so maybe like Cherry Lane.
Cherry Lane, definitely.
But that's not a very big road, and most of it's in the city of Laurel. Because when I saw the graphic, the social media graphic about telling citizens not to contact DPW or 311 until 48 hours after the snow stopped, I sent an email back to Ms. Skinner with about a dozen laughing emojis, because I've been around long enough to know that our constituents don't want to wait 48 hours after a snow stops to see a plow and then to complain. So somehow we need to get, particularly for an ice storm, treatment in the residential streets sooner. And if I understand the policy, you don't pre-treat residential roads at all.
We have limited pre-treatment. We might do hills and cold spots. It's not really a practice that we
That
follow
was the
religiously.
number one complaint that I got from constituents was not only didn't they see a plow for days, but there was no pre-treatment. So I have a hilly district, and people are like, these hills cannot be negotiated. And when you have icing on them, so when your plow got out there and the snow was packed down into ice, now you're on a skating rink. We had an ambulance that was sliding down a hill. People have talked about the lack of communication. They've talked about 311. So I'm not sure who's responsible for the 311 situation, but this is typical of 311, not just with this. People file a 311 complaint, it gets closed out with no explanation. Now, I'm not sure if you're closing it out on your end. I don't think 311 closes out tickets. Who decides to close out a ticket?
We have, as we begin the process of addressing 311 complaints, we close them out. Now, sometimes, I think in the beginnings, complaints were put into 311 with no complaint. It would, there was no complaint at all. So, no, there was no comment. So that is not something that the department has any way of addressing. So they might have been closing those. When they sorted it, they would sort, and if you have a complaint, that is to be dealt with. If there's no complaint, they really can't do anything with it, and they might have been closing those.
I've heard my other council colleagues mention this, and I got a lot of complaints from constituents and from my staff who heard from constituents that they filed a 311 complaint and it got closed out. There was no plow, no treatment, no anything, and no explanation. Unless they're all entering them incorrectly. By the way, like I said, this is not just this storm. This happens with DPIE all the time. And there's nothing more frustrating to a constituent than filing a complaint, having it closed and no explanation and the complaint's not resolved. That will just make you wonder why you're contacting 311. A bigger, to me, I've heard the communication issue. I'm going to hammer this point. The communication issue is not just related to the snowstorm. I've been beating this horse for several years now. We have council offices with lots of staff who know our districts and can help you, can help DPIE. But this administration, going back for the last 5 years, does not reach out and take the assistance of council offices. I'm looking at the prioritization, I don't know my district. I've got communities that are on steep hills, they're at the top of hills. They weren't done for 5, 6, 7 days. But now flatter areas were done. Your drivers, they're not going to know necessarily where the hills are. They don't know where the problem streets are. My staff does, I do. I appreciate Mr. Holt came out and drove around. I was out driving around. I sent some photos. And so part of the question is communication in general across the county administration is not helpful in the sense that we can provide boots on the ground and help direct you to prioritization. And that just, there's no desire for us to participate. And that's not directed at you. That's directed to the administration, above your pay grade. But it's persistent, and it leads to problems like we just had, where we could have helped you, and we could have helped other agencies. But I'm curious, when I looked at, and you got emails from me, Montpelier neighborhood, steep hills, Montpelier Forest, steep hills. These were the last communities done. There's places on hills should be the first communities done. And if you don't know where those hills are, could you ask us? We'd be happy to help you prioritize. Who decides prioritization on the residential streets? So I'm in Snow District 1. When someone sends out the vehicles to do residential, who decides where they go first?
I think they have a standard operating procedure that deals with it goes from primaries to secondaries on both the collectors and arterials as well as the residentials. It's the same philosophy. So it's possible that you could have like a secondary residential that, even though it's on a steep slope, would be have a lower pecking order, so to speak. And that's a good point. That's something that we're looking at to sort of make changes to sort of rationalize the approach that we're taking, not just sort of going primary, secondary necessarily.
I would strongly recommend you take advice from council members on this particular point. What are the most important secondary or residential streets in terms of things like hills or other problems? Getting all the flat streets done first. Yeah, I'm sure those people appreciate it, but that's not going to solve a lot of problems. I didn't have the experience, my staff didn't have the experience that Ms. Blagay did. And I guess they should have known to contact you, Ms. Can't pronounce your name, Ms. O. My staff complained that they sent dozens of messages, emails, and phone calls to DPWT staff. And not only didn't they get a response, there wasn't an away message, there wasn't anything. It was just a dead letter. And that, everyone else has complained about that, so I'm not going to beat that horse any further. But if we can't reach you and there's no responsiveness, I mean, that we don't know what to tell the constituents. So like I said, everyone else has already talked about that. I think I've covered the main points. But so we need some kind of pretreatment of residential. We need to work together as partners because we can help, and we need better communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Director, and to your deputy directors, I know those seats you're sitting in are probably very hot, but you're going to endure and get through it. What I have, Mr. Director, that as I look around this room, I don't think any other person, including yourself, could speak to. In 1996, I became a county employee in the Department of Public Works and Transportation 2 weeks before the blizzard of 96. So I have that perspective, working those 12 hours, dealing with the snow response. In 2010, when County Executive Jack Johnson and my colleague to my right had just come into office in their elected positions, we had the Armageddon. And what I wanted to, 2002, I'm sorry, and we had a snow blizzard where places like Toys R Us and New Carrollton, they collapsed because of the ice. And he spoke of the Armageddon in 2010 when Sharon Baker was coming in. I bring all that up to say, having worked both in the Office of Emergency Management and working in the Public Works, I'm glad our chair had a chance to ride with you all, and I would recommend your team coordinate with the rest of the council members an opportunity, if they have not, to travel and learn how you all respond and prepare for snow challenges or any kind of weather challenges. But I also would ask, I saw her in here, Ms. Courtney, if she would coordinate with the council and their staff, if they're available, to really go with 311 and get some insight, and then they can be on the ground and give some practical recommendations to how we deal with 311. But what I was going to ask Mr. Director, because all my colleagues have asked really the questions, when I worked in Public Works, it was Department of Environment, DPIE, Park and Planning, all those agencies. Normally, when you get hired, you knew you would have to, during snowstorms, work the 8 to 12 hour shifts, and we had areas. Back then, even though you said the big trucks were out on the primary and secondary, someone like me, I had one of the four-wheelers. I had to do neighborhoods. So you all really don't do it like that anymore? Or is it that the county employee mandatory response to snow has changed for people like in DPIE, DPIE, Park and Planning, DOE? They don't come out now. They're not a part of another compliment?
It's not mandatory, Councilman. So we do have park and planning and the landfill which whose DOE participate. They provide a certain number of trucks, like they have big trucks, and they assist with the plowing. It's DPIE participated in this snow event. They had not done so since I've been here. They have not participated really actively in the snow event, but Director Abrams was able to provide us with 8 inspectors this time, which helped a lot. It sort of helped part of our quality control. So that's another area of improvement that we had a discussion with acting CX Jackson and Mr. Stanton about and Mr. Holt about that we wanted to sort of foster going back to that sort of like synergy between the departments, because no one department has all the staff needed to sort of deal with these sorts of very taxing events. Everyone is working 12 hours. My staff here, including myself, worked 84 hours in a week. Some longer, some of them longer, and really the benefit of different departments participating is priceless. I would say it's really important for them to participate, but it's not mandatory. We do request, and they do it, they don't.
Yeah, I hear you, but what I'm sharing that you all, if Mr. Holt is sitting here, you should consider that model again, because it had more employees out. Instead of having you all do the primary and secondary, they were out into the communities, and as a result, the ice and everything didn't get a chance to settle and get compacted. That's what I wanted to share. And also with 311, working with emergency management, they should consider. We had CERT program. They don't even have to be the volunteers from the community emergency response team. It could be the police. Citizen Academy alumni situation. What happened was these were individuals who have been vetted and gone through background checks, and they were able to work in the 311 center because you have the additional 911 area where they could work and help assist with the overwhelming, because it's abnormal in a time of snowstorms that you're going to get all these calls. They could help with dealing with the calls, taking the information, just something to think about. And lastly, we have this legal, or we have it that we want county contracts and minority contracts to deal with, get the contracts in the county. So how did having to stick with local contracts that may not have the equipment you referenced impacted Public Works' ability to respond to this last snow?
The way it impacts us is that many of the local contractors do not have the heavy equipment. They do not have that heavy equipment. So we recently did a bid for supplemental services, and we got I think it was 6 4x4s in the bid, and that was what the local contractors could provide. Now, to be able to move to the phase that I was suggesting, the concurrent approach, we really need additional 6-wheel and 10-wheel trucks, so they can sort of anchor the primaries and secondaries while our 4x4s and other units can be sent into the residential areas. So it has that impact on the department.
Okay, let me ask the question another way. Is it something that maybe your team, working with Ms. Skinner and our chair, is it something we need to review when it comes to emergency situations like snow business or ice that comes with the snow, or are we okay? What I'm asking is, did our current legislation and regulations limit you from doing you and your team from doing your job?
We would look at work with the Office of Procurement to see if we can get additional heavy trucks, but I think the other matter of legislation is something that maybe I can't really speak on with any.
And
certainty.
right. And then lastly, is it possible when we're not into a snow, we may come out of a snowstorm, but have your team consider preparing bilingual maps so that when you're sending your team out, and like you said, you're going to have some non-speaking or English is not their first language contractors, where you can give them those maps to better help them respond to communities that you may assign them to.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We will pursue that. Thank you.
And I'm gonna get out of the way so the chair won't tell me my time is up. Your automated vehicle location system, I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you all had some challenges with it before. Do you have the right system, or what's the recurring challenge with its ability to work when you need it?
I think the problem with the system, I was told, is that there was a corrupt configuration file that was causing it not to read the transponder data that the trucks were transmitting. Each truck is given a transponder, which it broadcasts, and it shows up on our portal. The software had that problem, and so it was selectively reading some trucks, and other trucks it did not read at all. So we were able to fix that working with our staff and Director Wanda Gibson's OIT area, that we were able to resolve that. So the software, we had an opportunity to test it this weekend because we were working this weekend, and it worked. It's tracking the trucks properly. Notwithstanding the odd failure of a unit, but that's, that can be addressed, but it is tracking the trucks once the transponder is on. So I think that matter has been resolved, and we got far better coverage and quality control this time because the command center is able to see where the units are and areas that they may or may not have touched.
Thank you, and thank you for answering my questions. My last question, is there any funds available for citizens and communities that plow their street? Councilmember Begay spoke about a text that the chair, she and I received, and the community was saying that because no plows came, they ended up contracting them. And I'll ask you this offline. That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here and for the work that your team did. I know that there are things that we're correcting, and that's appropriate, but I do know that your team did put in a lot of work and a lot of hours, and want to appreciate you for that. Mr. Dranoga touched on this, but I had this on my list. Do you have a list of hills and dangerous spots, like sort of areas that we think, are going to be treacherous or, are going to be problematic areas? And I am thinking about our neighborhoods, but obviously anywhere in the county.
We do. We have hills as well as cold spots, areas that the pavement tends to freeze faster, but we do have that.
Okay. And then are those then pre-treated? I know you have a limited amount of pre-treatment that you do in neighborhoods, but if those areas could be pre-treated, that would probably help head off some of these problems.
That's one of the operational SOPs that we're changing. Before every storm, we plan to do that. We also plan to take a look and see if the list is comprehensive.
Right.
That there may be, the point that was made, areas that are not really on the list but should be.
Yeah.
And we'll make those changes as part of our improvements.
Well, in Council District 3, we will be compiling that list, or we already have that list, but we will be sharing that with you then for sure. And we appreciate, that, because I think that will make a real difference out there. I have a question about the snow operation. I understand, I wondered why, we were getting calls, particularly from people who were in cul-de-sacs and, stub ends of streets, and then found out later that, well, those are the last areas to be plowed, apparently. Can you just talk to us a little bit about why that is and what how you go about that? And I know the primary streets and secondary streets and then residential streets, but then it seems like if there's a street that, then dead ends somewhere, then that whole block or two blocks don't get plowed until I don't know when, till the very end. I mean, those were a lot of the places where we had to call and ask people to go back out. People were concerned they missed my street, my part of the street. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, certainly. So basically the prioritization is based on traffic volume.
Yeah.
So the roads that carry, so even within the residential areas, we classify them by primary residential and secondary residential. Secondary residential would be your dead ends, your cul-de-sacs, and streets that don't carry a high volume of traffic. So in the philosophy that is followed, we want to make the road network able to carry as many cars as vehicles as it can, while we're sort of processing. So you go from primaries to secondaries, both on the arterials and collectors and on the residentials. So that's why the cul-de-sacs are sort of treated less. And that is an inherent problem in the sequential model that we follow. The way to fix that is to concurrently start at the same way that we're treating the primaries, started with the residentials as well. And then that order is not as significant to the storm event, because you will eventually get it within a shorter defined period of time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to dig into this a little bit because, people feel like they've been missed, like, and that freaks people out, because it's like, oh, well, we're going to be stuck here for the next 3 days. And in some cases they were, people see the plows out and then it just completely, misses their area, 5 houses, 7 houses, 10 houses. But is that efficient to have to then come back to that same neighborhood? And I know you're going around neighborhoods, you're doing them, multiple times, but what's this based on? Is this a national practice, or is this what we've come up with, or what is this, like one of 3 different theories? Like, can you speak to that a little bit?
I think it might be like an industry practice more than unique to Prince George's County. It really has to do with you really want the volume, like vehicles to be able to traverse. You don't have a high vehicle count going into a cul-de-sac.
Right.
And while every street is important, part of what it speaks to is that when our tracker is not working properly, the command staff is not necessarily able to see that a cul-de-sac has been missed. Like this storm here, we were able to see that, and we were able to sort of call the districts, the snow districts, and say, listen, you're missing areas, you need to send crews back here, or we can send inspectors out to actually verify that the area has been missed. And that sort of process, I think, will work. I don't think that changing the order and deal, is going to work well, because even if you did do the secondaries, they wouldn't have, and you didn't do the primaries, they wouldn't have any place to go. You would clear it, and then they'd be stuck. They'd come out into the primaries and get stuck, and then that would really mess up the operation. So I think that's a logical order to sort of deal with it. The issue is more a quality control issue, to be sort of frank about what I think the problem is. That on our part there's a need for better quality control improvements, which are garnered by sort of having the electronic AVL tracker, as well as having more inspectors to actually put eyes on sites that are showing up electronically as being missed.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we can reevaluate the efficiency of, if you already have a truck in a neighborhood, how much does it take to then, they go and do another neighborhood and then 10 other neighborhoods and then have to come back through to each of those when they've already been there. I just wonder if that is the most efficient way. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not a road, guy, I'm not, but I just, I wonder about that. And I would like us to have a more conversation about that. I'm not saying that it's definitely wrong. I'm not saying it's right. I don't know, but it just seems to me that if you already have a crew out there, how much does it take to push snow for another 5 houses that you're already there, versus driving back there, and spending time driving between different neighborhoods when you've already been there. So that's something I'd like us to look at.
Okay, we will.
The snow tracker, you've already addressed. I appreciate that. I guess we will trust that is fixed, and that will fix all the things where streets were shown but nothing ever showed up on those streets, and it showed that middles of streets were plowed but not the ends of the streets and that kind of thing. And also, I guess I would say, you kind of tested that this past weekend and it worked. Do you maybe next year before the first snowfall, we'll test that somehow? I hope that we can test that just to make sure that it's accurate, annually. Is
Yeah,
that part of-
so we do an annual dry run. We're all snow routes are sort of driven. So that's our opportunity not only to test the fleet equipment, but also the tracker.
Okay.
So the drivers in each snow district are required to traverse
Okay.
all routes. So we would see whether or not the tracker is actually tracking correctly, is picking up.
So this year, was it tracking accurately when you tested it, or was it not, or was that not done this year?
It was done, but I don't think that it behaved consistently. It has been something that we had been wrestling with for a while. We did not
Okay.
weren't able to sort of understand why it was not working. It was only recently, with the help of our OIT, that we were able to sort of get to the bottom of what really happened.
So we knew it might have been an issue. but-
Right, we knew that it might have been an issue, right? Because sometimes it didn't seem to have any rhyme or reason. Like sometimes trucks would track properly, and then other times it wouldn't track the transponder. I don't really know why.
Dead zone.
Right, there were dead zones, right, where we couldn't see
Okay.
it.
Okay, well, I'm glad that it's fixed now and that we will make sure that every year it's fixed before the snow season. Thank you. Last two questions, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief. Parking restrictions. So we actually put out to our communities to park on the even side of the street because that was the guidance we got from that was on the website through communications from DPWT. Earlier, you answered one of my colleagues saying that we don't really have that, but we've always put that out, park on the even side of the street. So I don't know if we need to understand where we are on that. Well, some do, and it does help. So that is something I think that we need to have further conversation around. I know one snowstorm, I don't know if it was snow apocalypse or what it was, we actually did have a civic association, and they got it out to all their block captains, and people actually all parked on the even side of the street, and it was one of the best neighborhoods that we've ever seen. So that is something that can work. And then, the pretreatment, you mentioned we started a little bit late. We've learned from that, I hope, and next time, I guess we'll be out there sooner. Yeah. Madam Chair, I appreciate this briefing and doing it so quickly, and I know there was a lot of consternation in our communities, a lot of people, who were missed, a lot of the conditions, the icy conditions, and the uniqueness of the cold being so long. I know a lot of times we have snow and the next day it's a warm day, and that makes a difference, but we have to get this right. So thank you very much for all the work you do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, thank you. It was frustrating for everybody, but we hope that we've learned, of course, and that it doesn't snow anymore this year, at least. Ms. Orietta.
Thank you. Echoing the sentiments of my colleagues, thank you for this briefing and the presentation. I do want to start off with a main concern that I have. And it's about, I think, accountability. I know this happened for me. I'm not sure about other council members, but we got so many calls from residents specifically saying that from your agency and 311 that they were told specifically to call council members because we were the ones responsible for deciding what roads would be paved when and the process. So I want to state on the record that we all know as council members that that's not true, that we don't have control over that process. We're not accountable to that process. Now, if the county executive administration wants to acquiesce that to the council, I'd love to be the one to make that decision. But it's just not the case. And for transparency, I think it's really important that, and I think one of my colleagues mentioned this, when mistakes are made, that people need to be accountable to that. So the administration and the agencies make that decision. I don't even know the process right now. One of my questions is going to be, can I see the outline? Like Councilmember Denoga mentioned, even understanding the tiered system doesn't help us understand what's first, second, and third. Even if you say there's, first and secondary priority. I don't know what's number 5 on the secondary list versus what's number 20 on the secondary list. And would it be helpful if communities understood that they're on a first or secondary, street up front, right? How transparent can we be with the information? Like if I knew I could look up my street and knew I was on a tier 4 in the system, which meant if it was really bad storm, I might be, 6 days out. People won't be happy, but it goes back to the communication, at least that they know up front. And it goes back to what Councilmember Begay said, and some of my other colleagues, that if they are in the assumption that something's going to be done in 48 hours, then they're under the assumption when they submit a 301 request, now it's going to be a week out. It's just the inconsistency around communication. And so the clearer we can be with expectations, the better. It might not be perfect, but at least it's clear. And if we could have that information, then we can, be an asset to ensuring the community knows. That goes back to communication, and hopefully moving forward, we can have clearer communication between the agencies and the council office. I know many of us will send out trying to get an update, seeing where things are. Either we'll get no response whatsoever or just received. I mean, that's not enough information for us to do anything with, to understand where they're in the queue, how long is it going to take to get a response. And so it's really frustrating for us because 9 times out of 10, we're going to be the ones held responsible, even though we have no control over it. At least let's be armed with enough information, and at least also treat us like a partner in this. Like, we want to be helpful because we want our community to be taken care of. We want the issue to be addressed. So we're willing to give you as much information as possible, but we have to move away from this, no communication with the council members or with certain council members, or we just have to move to a place where we can actually work together and get things done for the residents, because the only people that don't benefit are the residents. So I just want to make sure it's clear for the record that that is not a decision that the council makes. And am I correct in that that's not a decision that the council makes?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay. So for the record, we're all clear on that. So one of my questions around, you mentioned something about equipment for a certain area, and I wanted to make sure I was understanding that right. Does the equipment differ depending upon what area, or is the equipment the same for each area? Because I wasn't sure if I was following what you said about the equipment not matching that area.
So I think the equipment size is related to the width of the road, what the road can sort of can carry. So that if we have like 3 types of 3 main classes of equipment: the 4x4s, which are pickups, the 6-wheel dump trucks, and the 10-wheel dump trucks, which are the really large double axle tandem trucks, which are heavy pushers and carry a lot of salt. Many of the residential streets are not wide enough if cars are on them, or to safely allow a 10-wheeler to traverse it. Sometimes not even a 6-wheeler can get by if cars are parked on both sides. So we would use the 4x4s in that area. But on the primary routes, which are your multi-lane roads primarily, you do need primarily your big trucks, your 6-wheelers and 10-wheelers to really service those roads adequately. And that is in our complement of equipment, That is the class of equipment that we are a little short on. We have adequate 4x4s, but we don't have enough 6-wheelers and 10-wheelers in our operation. So we have to use this phased approach where we work on the primary routes first, and then when we are sort of, have them in reasonably good condition, then we sort of move into the residential areas in earnest. So that takes time. That adds time to the process.
So you're saying, based on your compliment, you're lacking the bigger ones,
Yes.
but you have more of the small ones. So am I hearing you correctly? So then you have to utilize the smaller ones on the bigger roads, and that's the reason why for the time delay?
It just takes longer. They're not suited for the wider roads. They push snow, and you get these little channelized, what they call them, windrows that sort of sit in the road that really are not really what you want. So the lack of the quantity of them affects the time, and to some degree can affect the quality of the snow operation as well. But certainly time is a factor.
Have we been short the number that we need for a long period of time, or have some, phased out because they're older and this is a newer issue? I guess I'm trying to understand, for how long have we known we don't have enough, and what's the plan to fix that?
Well, we have been trying. We've known it the department's known it for a while. We have been trying to fix it, but in the bids that we are not really been successful in getting the large trucks in our bids. We tend to have contractors who have the smaller trucks participating in the solicitation process. So, we are looking at different ways of sort of working with the Office of Procurement, Pamela, in that office, to see what we can do to increase the complement of large trucks that are needed. That would allow us to more quickly address all 2,000 miles plus roads that the county has.
Okay. And doubling back to the issue with the tracking system. So am I correct to understand that now we have a complete understanding of the issue and it's fixed, or we're planning on fixing it, we're hoping it's fixed? I just want to make sure that we're clear on what's happening with that.
Yeah, it is fixed. It worked well. We had an opportunity to use it this weekend when we had winter weather, and it was picking up the location of the plows correctly. So it's fixed, and appears to be working the way that we expect it to work. At least it was useful for the command staff this weekend.
And just wanted to go back to a question that Councilmember Denoga asked. I don't feel like we really got 100% clarity on who decides the order, or just what it is, right? It sounded like you said that the list is already set, but who decided what the list is? Where does the list live? Can we see the list? I just really want to, and how often is the list evaluated? You mentioned that it's based on traffic. Traffic patterns change based on development. So how often is that looked at? So just trying to understand that.
I'm not sure that it has been looked at that recently, but one of the changes that we are doing, we're taking an entire comprehensive re-examination of the entire snow program. Part and parcel of that would be taking a look at that list. But the primary roads, by and large, are fixed. They're not really going to change. Your large roads are already constructed. Prince George's County is a well-built-up location. We're not building very many new roads. So the prioritization of roads, which is set by MNC PPC in classifying the roads, is fixed. And
same for residential, though? Or does that fluctuate?
Residential might fluctuate more if you have new subdivisions that are built. You might have new primary residentials, entering, or secondary residentials like your cul-de-sacs. So the quantity could change, and the names of streets would change as well if new subdivisions are being constructed.
And could we see that list phased out in the way in which you described it, of the primary and secondary, and then the primary and secondary also for residential? and the actual streets. And then if they could be broken down, I know it'd be easier for us to consume it if it was broken down by councilmatic district, but I know that that's not easier for you, at least if it was in the what is it, the winter
snow district?
district? The snow district. But I think it would be helpful for us to have that information so that also when we get calls, we know, okay, we can set that expectation for our residents on where they're going to fall on the list. Or I think to Councilmember Denoga's point, there might be some issues where we might say that might not make the most sense where it's placed, and we can explain why, and maybe go out with someone from your team to explain to why this actually should probably be moved up as a priority list compared to some other streets that you have. And if we could do that, forward before we get close to the next storm, I think we could be better prepared to deal with this issue in a better way.
Yeah, we can. The listing is established, is pre-established by the MNC PPC, the classifications of roads. So we certainly could provide that by district. That's not difficult to do. As far as the I think what was mentioned by some of the other council members was assisting us in identifying priority locations for pre-treatment, that areas that may not currently be on our pre-treatment list. And we are amenable to sort of getting that information and considering it for treatment, for addition for areas that are priority areas.
Thank you. And so that the follow would just be, if we can get those lists, I think all of us would love to see what the list is currently in the order, and then also the pre-treated list. So then we could say, oh, these are some that should be added to that. And then lastly, if we can figure out a way to publicize the priority streets so that people could look it up and know, okay, I should be prepared that, my street is going to take a little bit longer to get to, because I think that communication could help with some of the expectations that our residents have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burrows.
Thank you. And I'll be brief because, my colleagues, I think, covered the gamut. But I do need to give voice to this. The southern part of the county was left in abysmal condition. That's simply unacceptable. The residents in the southern part of the county pay exorbitant property tax like everyone else, and we deserve high quality services as well. And time again from this government, we often receive the short end of the stick. And so I sent you a letter on January 10th, communicating that concern to you and asking for additional information. To this date, your office has remained unresponsive to that letter. I had so many constituents reach out to me on Nextdoor, on Twitter, on Instagram, through email. I had residents show up to my parents' home complaining about the snowstorm. I sent all of those over to your office, and as of today, my understanding is that your office has still been unresponsive to those concerns as well. I wonder if we have the appropriate expertise in dealing with these matters. Whenever you say we don't have the correct salt, as a council member, I don't know what salt should be on the roads, but I would hope that the experts in DPWT would know and would be proactive in that fashion. And in this case, that did not take place. And so overall, what I would say is you can't have poor execution and poor communication and a lack of oversight at the same time. And that's what it appears to have happened in this case. One thing that I would offer as suggestions in moving forward is, to Councilmember Denoga's point and to Councilmember Reata's point, feel free to work collaboratively with the council. Because at the end of the day, we want you to be very, very successful. Because when you're successful, we're all successful. But when you are unsuccessful in such a major way, we are all unsuccessful in such a major way. And I know I had several senior citizens who did not have any plows come on their streets for over 7 days. Senior citizens who needed medication, who needed to go to doctor's appointments, and and we're unable to do so. And so if there are situations where I'm concerned about the health and safety of residents, I expect that when we reach out to your division, that there will be a response that is one that is responsive to the concern. And that did not happen in this case. And I hope in the future we can fix that. To Councilmember Fisher's point, and the chair and I spoke along with Council Administrator, perhaps the district, just so that it's not confusing to folks, you can refer to them as zones, because I had a number of people reach out to me since we've been in this meeting simply saying, I don't see District 6, 7, 8, and 9 on this list. You know, once again, South County is being overlooked. But in reality, it's just you know, if you could just call it zones, it might fix that problem. I would also say that perhaps if you are, perhaps each of these zones could have a liaison between the council office and their team, just so that we can immediately feed you information that might be helpful. And then, you know, my colleagues have addressed the other points, and I will address my other points offline. Thank you.
Okay, we will go to Ingrid Watson, who is our last questioner today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for pretty much covering everything that I had on my list. I do have a couple of items that I just want to share. And first, I want to say thank you, Director Johnson, for your responsiveness to my concerns with my residents in my neighborhoods. But you know, I got on my knees to beg about a few things, and appreciate your responsiveness. And thank you to Mr. Streeter as well. I appreciate his work on District 4 residents as well. Question in regards to the snow tracker, you mentioned when Councilmember Oriala asked about it that it was fixed. I know one of my neighborhoods is not on the snow tracker, or it wasn't, Collingbrook Estates. And I received many calls and concerns about their streets. So if we could just make sure that that whole neighborhood is on the tracker, none of their streets were listed. So if we could just kind of work together and figure out, make sure that, you know, in addition to that neighborhood, that the other neighborhoods are included. Also wanted just to talk a little bit about customer service. And I know this is not in your direct jurisdiction, but just with 311 and snow removal, snow operations. I did receive, you know, several calls about people being dismissive and just not, and I know people are tired, you know, our staff is tired, but they just weren't really listening to the residents and not showing as much empathy, I guess, as could have been shown based on the situation. So yeah, customer service is really key here, and patience with our residents, as you know, they're kind of stuck at home with kids and had been doing that now for 3 weeks because the kids are still home from the holiday break. So just want to make sure that, you know, our customer service is up to par. Also wanted to just bring up the fact, you know, I sincerely appreciate again the work of our staff and your staff specifically, as well as snow operations in 311. And I know, you know, that there may have been some employee burnout. And also scheduling, and also wanted to ask about, you know, how the employees were expected to get to work during the storm, and just kind of wanted to find out from you how that worked.
So DPWT staff?
Correct.
Yeah, so they're mobilized well in advance of the storm coming in. So the first shift that comes in, which is sort of like the anchor, you know, sort of dealing with that, arrives several hours before the storm is predicted to hit or hits our area, and they're sent into their respective snow districts to stage in preparation of plowing. Once they begin plowing, the roads generally allow with care. They're passable, and with care, the second shift can come in, succeeding shifts can come in. And we do this throughout the entire operation, arriving several hours in advance of the actual, the event, or sometime before the full shift takes place. So we haven't really had any issues of staff not being able to report for their shift.
But were they expected to drive their own vehicles, or did they have transportation to get into work? Or because I know
They use their own vehicles. They use their own vehicles.
Okay.
So many have 4x4s. So they make it in. That is not. We have not. Assigned like county vehicles. I mean, we actually need those to fight the operation largely. So either inspection vehicles. So they're required to use their own vehicles and to report as directed.
Now, is that something that's stated in their job description or duties as assigned when they come onto, when they
Yes.
assume the position?
Yes.
That if there's a snowstorm, that they're required to report?
They're required to report.
Use their own vehicle or transportation to get into work?
I don't think it's that specific, but they're required to report. It's part of their terms of employment.
Right. Just wondering about that. Okay. So I look forward to also, getting the list of the pre-treated streets, and also wanted to find out, how do you all address, sidewalks in your communication to the residents?
Sidewalks are an area of improvement that we are considering. We currently do not have a sidewalk the team that deals with sidewalks that are not covered by the abutters ordinance. The county has an abutters ordinance, so that if you are a property owner adjacent to a sidewalk or abutting a sidewalk, a public sidewalk, you're responsible for moving that. But there are some locations where there is no property owner who abuts the sidewalk, and that's sort of like strictly a public sidewalk. And it's not an area that we currently address. It's an area that is of concern to me and our team. We've discussed it, and that's an area of improvement that we want to make. And it will require some additional equipment, like snow tractors or types of equipment that can effectively and efficiently deal with sidewalks, say on bridges and things of that nature.
And to that end, how does DPW&T work with PGCPS in regards to sidewalks and streets that need to be plowed? How do they work in conjunction with each other?
We prioritize routes that are near schools that school buses would use. We do not really, as I mentioned, have any sidewalk prioritization or any program for sidewalks. I would guess that if there's sidewalks in front of the school would be responsible for clearing the sidewalk, but the path to the school is not something that we currently address.
Yeah, because I was made aware that, we have 30,000 walkers.
Right.
So, if the kids can't walk on the sidewalk, they're going to walk in the road.
This road, right.
So, we just need to figure out, I guess, what our plan is for that moving forward, because that was a big problem and a big point of concern, and thus why the schools were closed for so long. In addition,
yes, it's an area that we have we've identified as being a sort of an area in need of improvement, and part of the revamping of the snow program would be to include some capability for the department to address sidewalks, because to your point, we don't really want pedestrians or children walking in streets. That's really not what we want. So it's something that we are looking at currently and figuring out how to sort of implement it.
that'd be great. My last thing is, you all will develop some sort of, I guess, changes to the plan of communication in the future to the residents, and share that with us, so at least we can understand and all be on the same page. I feel like every department was kind of on a different page. And, we weren't really made aware of where everybody was or what the actual communication was. So I felt out of the loop in a lot of cases, and I don't like feeling that way because I can't share the actual information with my residents. So I'd love to be able to have that. real information and coordination with our partnering agencies. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. And actually, one of the questions that you raised did make me wonder about the employees, because I did see how hard they were working, and 12-hour shifts are a lot for people who might not be accustomed to working overnight. The idea of everybody else being told, stay off the road, but you've got to come in. I know people need to work. Did they all come into work? Were any of them allowed to telework? How did that work?
We have very limited ability for positions in the snow plan for telework. We do have some limited capability also to house people in hotels if they live a certain distance away from their reporting location. But by and large, it's something that we can look at, but it hasn't really been an issue since I've sort of been here in the county, that, where folks are not able to get in. I could imagine if you did have like a blizzard condition, that we might have to house people in hotels and not let them go home. They would stay in a hotel fairly locally, so they're ready for the next shift. They'd be sort of on station until the storm is over.
And when the last 12-hour shift ended, what kind of break were people getting before they were expected back to their regular schedule?
They get 12 hours off.
They get what?
12 hours?
2.5 hours?
No, 12 hours.
Oh, 12
12
hours.
hours, yeah,
Okay,
so,
so they
right.
get one shift off?
One shift off, yes.
Okay.
So you're one off, one on, one off until the storm is over. But
That's a lot.
it's a lot of work, yeah. Snow is very, very challenging work and tough work. Everyone works really hard. And, even though we're not really, very happy with the results that we got, I'm really happy with the performance of the department, the staff. Everyone works hard, takes the job very seriously, in spite of some of the challenges that we have as an agency. But there's no shortage of the effort being made to sort of service Prince George's County roads.
Well, I'm sure we're going to be more prepared next time, right?
We will, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all coming in, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.